From puritans to presidents, abolitionists to rabbis, artists to ethicists, Americans have understood the text of Esther to speak to their moment. It has offered solace to immigrants, forged solidarity, impacted politics, and roused individuals to realize that deliverance was not to come from some other place, but from their own heroic actions on behalf of their people. We too turn once again to Esther, to the timeless scroll that continues to urge us to find strength and redemptive possibility in the least expected of places. The Hebrew Bible's ideas, themes, and characters have forged a foundational place in the American story, from its pre-founding to today. The Bible's language, concepts, and arguments have long shaped America's moral language of liberty. It is no surprise, then, that when the colonists were faced with the harsh hand of the British monarch, King George III, the biblical book of Esther and the story of Purim served as a prism through which to view their fight in defense of liberty. As the book of Esther recounts, in ancient Persia, there ruled a king named Xerxes, whom the Bible refers to as Ahasuerus. His advisor, the wicked Haman, hatched a plan to have all the Jews of Ahasuerus' kingdom killed. However, his plans were foiled by Esther, Ahasuerus' queen, whose Jewish identity had been a secret, and Mordecai, Esther's cousin. From 1765 to 1776, the decade of the colonists, resistance and rebellion against the British, politicians, commentators, and preachers turned to the Purim story as a way to understand their own struggle. Upon celebrating the repeal of the hated Stamp Act in 1765, the joyous Boston Gazette stated its presumption that whoever had suggested George III enact such a law in the first place was as great an enemy as the wicked Haman to the Jews. The New York Journal in 1774 noted that, like George III, the Persian king Ahasuerus reigned over many distant provinces and was, by his prime minister, induced to oppress and take measures to destroy many of his subjects. According to this line of thinking, Lord Bute and later Lord North, George III's advisors, who recommended harsh treatment of the colonists, were the veritable British Hamans. A Southern Presbyterian minister named Thomas Rees preached in a sermon titled "The Character of Haman." That ambition sticks at nothing to compass its designs. It wades to empire through seas of blood. No principles of religion, virtue, or humanity can restrain the wretch whose ruling passion is the lust for power. Lord North, just like Haman, Rees thundered, would risk an empire rather than lose this gratification. It was thought by some Americans at the time that while Ahasuerus and George III might have been naturally compassionate and benevolent, it was only the haughty prime ministers and court parasites who were to be blamed for the monarch's evil decrees. But as the contest between Britain and the colonies grew more bitter, American patriots became less forgiving toward the king. George III, too, came under criticism as being too ready to believe evil of his subjects and to comply with the oppressive measures of his prime minister, as the New York Journal put it. Like the ancient king Ahasuerus, George III must have taken up with his queen and the luxuries of the court and committed the management of his political affairs to a very bad man, the paper wrote. The story of the Book of Esther, with its monarchical and courtly contexts, offered Americans an invaluable outlet through which to interpret and contextualize their grievances against the British. Ultimately, it may also have helped them in the process of disposing of a king who was time and again presented as a dupe led by a corrupt and murderous minister. The story of Purim, then, had provided language and inspiration for the American Revolution to come, paving the way for the country's burgeoning republicanism and independence. Read Esther in America to find out more. Available wherever Jewish books are sold.